The sky was turning dark. Long shadows stretched over the broken battlefield, and the cold evening wind carried the smell of smoke and blood. Sergeant Elias Kane stood beside the paralyzed alien, staring at the horizon. Somewhere beyond the hills was the rally point, the place where his unit would be waiting for evacuation. If he started moving now, he might still make it, but if he stayed here much longer, he might not survive the night. Kane's stomach tightened. He knew what the smart choice was. Leave. Save himself. Follow orders. He crouched beside the alien again. They were breathing shallowly, their chest rising with difficulty. The glow in their strange crystalline eyes was dim but still present. They were clinging to life. Kane swallowed. "Why is this my problem?" he whispered. The alien's gaze locked on him, silently pleading. Kane remembered the war briefings. The Viari were supposed to be monsters cold and unfeeling, a species that knew no mercy. But the warrior in front of him didn't look like a monster. They looked helpless, alone. And Kane hated leaving people behind. He checked his bag. Supplies were low. A few water pouches, one last field med kit, and an emergency energy bar. Hardly enough for 2 lives. He sighed heavily. "This is insane," he muttered. To himself, his comlink crackled faintly again. A voice from command, sharp and impatient. "Sergeant Kane, respond. You're out of position. Evac window closing. Get to the rally point now. Do not engage enemy wounded. Do not assist enemy wounded. Repeat. Leave all Viari behind." Kane slowly turned the comlink off. The silence after the voice cut out felt heavier than the battlefield's smoke. He looked back at the alien. "Guess it's just you and me now." Carefully, he slid an arm under the alien's upper body. They were heavier than he expected, their armor dense and unfamiliar. He tried to lift, but stopped halfway, realizing he couldn't carry them alone without a plan. He'd need something to drag them on. Scanning the ruins, Kane spotted a broken piece of metal plating from a destroyed vehicle. It was big enough to act as a makeshift stretcher. "All right," he murmured, setting the alien down gently. "I'm not leaving you here, but you're going to have to work with me, all right?" The alien blinked slowly in response. It was strange, this silent understanding between 2 enemies. Kane worked quickly, tying straps from his gear to secure the alien onto the metal plate. The process wasn't easy. Every movement made the alien wince slightly, a faint tremor in their eyes showing the pain they couldn't express. Kane spoke softly as he worked, trying to distract them. "You know, back home, we have this saying, 'No one gets left behind.' I guess it doesn't just apply to humans, huh?" Once the alien was secured, Kane tested the weight. It was going to be hard. Pulling them across rubble and debris would slow him down, make him a target. But he couldn't turn back now. He gave the alien a small smile. "Hope you're worth it." The alien made a faint clicking noise, weak but deliberate. Kane didn't know what it meant, but it felt like acknowledgement. Night was falling fast. Kane grabbed his rifle, slung it over his shoulder, and began dragging the improvised stretcher. The metal scraped against the ground with a low sound. Every step was slow, careful. His eyes scanned the ruins constantly for movement. Enemy drones sometimes returned after dark to clear the battlefield. Half an hour passed. His arms ached. His legs burned. Sweat dripped into his eyes. But every time he thought about stopping, he glanced back at the alien. They were watching him silently, their eyes no longer filled with despair but with something else. Something Kane couldn't quite name. Trust. It was unsettling. He was the enemy, yet they trusted him more than their own people who had abandoned. Then suddenly, a distant noise made Kane freeze. The faint hum of a drone, crouched low, pulling the stretcher into the shadow of a collapsed wall. Holding his breath, he peeked over the rubble. A patrol drone floated by, scanning the ground with a red beam of light. Kane pressed a finger to his lips, looking at the alien. "Don't make a sound," he whispered instinctively, even though they couldn't speak. The drone passed, slowly, too slowly. Then it moved on. Kane exhaled in relief. He glanced at the alien. Their eyes blinked once, as if thanking him. "Yeah," he said softly. "We're in this together now." He tightened his grip on the stretcher and kept moving into the darkness, knowing there was no turning back. The night was colder than Kane expected. A thin layer of mist crept across the battlefield ruins, curling around shattered machines and fallen bodies. Every sound felt louder in the dark, the scrape of the metal stretcher against the ground, Kane's heavy breathing, and the faint hum of distant patrols. He was moving slowly, too slowly. The alien was heavy, and his arms were trembling from exhaustion. His boots slipped on loose gravel, and more than once he had to pause, catching his breath while scanning the shadows. But he didn't stop for long. Each time he looked back at the alien, he saw their eyes still open, still watching him. They didn't blink much, now maybe afraid that if they closed their eyes, they'd never open them again. "Still with me?" Kane whispered, a faint blink. "Yes. Good. We're getting out of here, somehow." He smiled faintly, even though he didn't know if the alien understood his words. The ruins stretched endlessly. Broken walls, twisted metal, and craters made the ground uneven. Kane had to lift and adjust the stretcher again and again. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, but he ignored the pain. Then came the first real danger. A faint blue light flickered ahead. Kane froze and ducked behind a pile of debris, dragging the stretcher with him. Slowly, carefully, he peeked out. 2 Vyari scout drones floated through the ruins, scanning for survivors. Their sharp beams of light sliced through the mist. Kane's heart pounded. If the drones found him, they wouldn't care that he was helping their own kind. To them, he was just a human enemy. He turned to the alien. "We have to stay quiet. If they see us, we're done." The alien's crystalline eyes shifted weakly toward the approaching drones. They couldn't move, couldn't fight. All they could do was trust Kane. Kane waited, holding his breath. The drones hovered closer, their scanning lights sweeping dangerously. Near-1 beam passed just inches from Kane's helmet. "Don't move. Don't move." After what felt like forever, the drones drifted away, disappearing into the distance. Kane let out a slow breath of relief. "That was close," he whispered. The alien blinked again, slow and deliberate. He gave them a small smile. "Yeah, we made it through that one." He kept moving, but the delay had cost precious time. Night was getting colder, and his body was starting to shake from fatigue. He needed a place to rest, a temporary shelter before they both collapsed. After another hour of dragging the stretcher, he finally spotted something ahead. A collapsed bunker. It wasn't much. Just a broken structure half buried in rubble. It was enough to provide some cover. Kane carefully pulled the alien inside. The bunker was quiet, dark, and smelled faintly of burnt electronics. He lowered the stretcher gently and sat down beside them, leaning against the cold wall. For a moment, there was silence, just the faint sound of both of them breathing. "You're tougher than you look," Kane said softly. "Still hanging on, huh?" The alien blinked slowly. Kane took out his last water pouch. He hesitated for a second. This was all he had left. But he tore it open anyway and held it near the alien's mouth. "Here, I'm not sure if you can even drink this, but try." He tilted the pouch carefully. A small amount of water slipped between the alien's lips. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, they swallowed. Kane smiled faintly. "There you go, better than nothing." Drank a tiny sip himself, saving what remained. Then he spoke again, even though he knew they didn't understand his language. "I have a little sister. She's stubborn, just like you. Always refuses to give up. You remind me of her." The alien's eyes softened. There was something in their gaze now, not just fear or pain, but a faint glimmer of curiosity. Kane chuckled quietly. "Don't look at me like that. I know this is crazy. Human helping a Vyari. If anyone from my squad saw this, they'd think I'd lost my mind." Outside, the wind howled through the ruins. Kane checked his rifle, making sure it was ready. He didn't know what would come next. Maybe enemy patrols, maybe nothing. But he knew he couldn't sleep deeply. Not yet. He looked at the alien again. "You're not dying here," he whispered. "Not while I'm still breathing." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Two enemies, trapped in the same moment, bound by the same fight to survive. In that silence, Kane realized something. This wasn't just about duty anymore. He wanted them to live. The bunker was quiet, almost too quiet. Outside, the wind moaned softly through the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, metal scraped against metal, a sound that could have been falling debris, or something moving. Kane kept his rifle close, his ears alert, but inside the bunker, it felt strangely peaceful compared to the chaos of the battlefield. He sat beside the alien, breathing slowly, trying to calm his racing thoughts. They were both alive. Now Kane glanced at the alien lying on the makeshift stretcher. Their strange, glowing eyes were still open, following his movements. Even in silence, there was something heavy in that gaze. "Still awake, huh?" whispered. The alien blinked once, slow but deliberate. Kane gave a faint smile. "You're tougher than any human soldier I've ever met. Most would have given up by now." The alien couldn't reply, but their eyes softened just slightly. Kane leaned back against the wall, exhausted. He was running on adrenaline and pure stubbornness. He had no idea how far he'd have to go to find safety, no idea if his unit had already left. But one thing he did know, he couldn't leave this alien behind now, not after everything they'd been through together tonight. To keep his mind sharp, he spoke softly, even though he knew they didn't understand. "I don't know if you know what I'm saying, but talking makes me feel like I'm not losing it." He chuckled quietly to himself. "My name's Elias Kane, Sergeant Earth Forces, and you? Do you have a name?" "Of course you do, but I guess I wouldn't be able to pronounce it." The alien blinked again, as if acknowledging his words. Kane tilted his head slightly. "Do you know I used to believe everything they told us about your kind? That you were cold, heartless killers? That saving one of you was a waste? But now I'm looking at you, and you're just like us. You don't want to die. You're scared. You're holding on to hope even when everything's against you." He paused, realizing the truth of his own words. The alien's eyes shifted slightly, their glow flickering in the dim light. Kane felt like they were really listening, for the first time since the war started. He saw the Veyari not as enemies, but as living, breathing people. They had families, friends, dreams, just like humans. Kane reached for his bag and pulled out the last energy bar. He hesitated, looking at it. It wasn't much, barely enough for himself. After a moment, he broke it in half. He chewed one piece slowly, then gently held the other half near the alien's mouth. "Here, try it. I don't know if you can eat this, but it's worth a shot." Carefully, he placed it between their lips. To his relief, they managed to swallow, weak but successful. Kane smiled faintly. "See? Not so bad." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then something unexpected happened. A faint clicking sound came from the alien's throat. It was quiet, weak, but deliberate, almost like they were trying to speak. Kane froze. "Wait, are you talking to me?" Another soft click. It wasn't words, not yet. But it wasn't random either. Kane leaned closer. "I don't understand, but I think you're trying." He placed a hand gently on their arm. "Don't strain yourself. Just rest. I'll handle the rest." The alien's eyes softened again. For the first time, Kane saw trust, real trust. Despite being enemies, despite not knowing each other's languages, there was now a silent connection between them. It was strange, comforting. Kane stayed awake through most of the night, listening for patrols and keeping watch. When his eyes grew heavy, he forced himself to stay alert. He couldn't risk falling asleep completely, not here. At some point, the alien made another faint sound. Kane turned toward them quickly, thinking something was wrong. But no, they were just looking at him. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something gentler. "Don't worry," Kane whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone." The alien blinked once, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Kane felt a strange warmth in his chest. They were enemies. Yes, but in this moment, in this darkness, They were just two souls trying to survive together. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, casting a soft pink glow over the ruined battlefield. Kane's muscles ached, and exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but he forced himself to keep moving. The alien warrior was still strapped to the makeshift stretcher, their breathing steady but weak. They had survived the night, but the danger was far from over. Ahead, the neutral zone lay just beyond a ridge, a place where no one dared fight. If Kane could get them there, they might finally be safe. But fate had other plans. As Kane dragged the alien across the rocky ground, a sudden noise shattered the morning calm. From the shadows, a group of enemy soldiers emerged. Burrier warriors. Heavily armed and fierce, Kane froze. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. He didn't have time to think. The soldiers shouted in their harsh language, demanding Kane stop and drop the alien, but Kane's grip tightened. He looked down at the alien's pale face and saw something he hadn't seen before, fear mixed with determination. They were not ready to give up. Kane stood tall. "I'm not leaving," he said, voice steady despite the pounding in his ears. The soldiers advanced, weapons raised. Kane raised his rifle in response, knowing this fight might be his last. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Alien warriors stirred. Their fingers twitched. Their eyes focused. In a moment that felt like magic, the paralysis that had held them began to loosen. Slowly, painfully, lifted a trembling hand and grabbed a fallen weapon nearby. The enemy soldiers faltered, surprised. Together. Kane and the alien stood side by side, two warriors united by a single will to survive. The alien fired their weapon, precise and powerful, despite the weakness in their limbs. Kane covered them, shooting with careful aim. They fought as one. Their movements almost synchronized. The battle was fierce but brief. The enemy soldiers, confused and overwhelmed by the unexpected alliance, retreated into the shadows. Kane lowered, his rifle breathing hard. He looked at the alien warrior who now stood unsteadily but proudly beside him. For the first time, Kane saw not just a wounded enemy, but a comrade. The alien nodded slowly, their eyes meeting his. In their culture, a gesture of respect and gratitude. Kane smiled, feeling a strange warmth spread through his chest. "We made it," he said softly. They both knew the journey was not over, but this moment was theirs. A moment of victory and understanding. The sun rose higher, illuminating the scars of war, but also the hope that came from unexpected friendship. The sun was now high in the sky, shining brightly over the quiet clearing where the human and the alien finally found safety. Sergeant Elias Kane sat against a rock, exhausted beyond words. His muscles burned, his breath came in shallow gasps, but he felt a deep peace he hadn't known in days. Beside him, the alien warriors Arend slowly pushed themselves up, testing their legs. They were still weak, but no longer paralyzed. Zyrene looked at Kane with eyes full of gratitude and something deeper - respect. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The bond was stronger than any language. Kane smiled tiredly. "You made it. I thought I was going to lose you back there." Zyrene's voice was rough, but steady as they finally spoke in broken common. "You is me when all others left." Kane nodded. "I couldn't just walk away. No one should be left behind." Zyrene reached out, placing a hand on Kane's arm. The touch was firm but gentle. "In my world, a life saved is a debt." "My life." Kane felt a chill run through him. He knew about life's debts, the sacred bonds that could last a lifetime, binding two souls in loyalty and honor. "You don't have to owe me anything," Kane said softly. "I did what I thought was right." Zyrene shook their head. "This is not just right, it is a promise." The alien warrior's words carried weight. Kane realized their worlds were different, but the meaning was the same: trust, honor, loyalty. Over the next few hours, rested and shared what little food and water Kane had left. Slowly, they began to talk, using broken phrases and gestures. Zyrene spoke of their homeworld, crystal forests, glowing seas, and proud warriors who fought to protect their people. Cain shared stories of Earth, of family, and hope. Despite the years of war and hatred, something new was growing between them, a fragile friendship built on respect and shared survival. As the day wore on, Cain felt something he hadn't felt since the war began: hope. When his unit finally found them later that afternoon, they were shocked to see the human and the alien together, alive and standing side by side. "Sergeant Cain, you disobeyed orders," the commander said sharply. Cain looked at the alien beside him. "I saved a life, even if it was an enemy. I don't regret it." The commander's expression softened slightly, but the rules were clear. Cain would face consequences, but that didn't matter to him anymore. What mattered was the promise made between two warriors, one human, one alien. Promise of loyalty, respect, and a new way forward. News of their story spread quickly through the ranks, changing how many saw the war and humanity itself. No longer were humans just the enemy. They were survivors. They were warriors who cared, and Zyrene, they kept their promise. The life debt forged in the fires of war bound them too. Cain forever. Together, they would face whatever the future held side by side. The human soldier's name was Sergeant Elias Cain. He had been separated from his squad hours ago. The battle had scattered everyone like dry leaves in a storm. His comlink was damaged, his supplies were running low, and his body ached with exhaustion. He was supposed to head toward the extraction point, but the path was dangerous, filled with enemy patrols. And yet, here he was, kneeling beside a motionless alien. Cain stared at the strange warrior lying in the rubble. He recognized the armor of the Vayari Empire's elite forces. These aliens were feared across the galaxy. They were strong, merciless, and proud. His commanders had told him that a wounded Vayari was still dangerous, that leaving them to die was safer. But as Cain looked closer, he saw no threat. The aliens' breathing was shallow. Their eyes, large, crystalline, and strangely beautiful, were open, but filled with pain. He saw fear there and something else. Despair, he muttered under his breath. "Damn it, why am I even stopping?" He should have kept walking. That was the smart thing. The alien was the enemy. An hour ago, this warrior would have killed him without hesitation. Helping them made no sense, but Cain didn't move. There was a strange pull in his chest, a feeling he couldn't ignore. Maybe it was the way the alien's gaze clung to him, silent but pleading. Maybe it was the way the battlefield around them was empty. No one else cared enough to stop. He sighed heavily and crouched lower. "Can you hear me?" he asked softly. The alien blinked once, slowly. It was the only movement they could manage. Cain felt a jolt in his heart. They were aware, still alive, still fighting to hold on. He checked their body for injuries. The armor was cracked and burned. Beneath it, Cain saw torn alien flesh, deep wounds leaking a strange silvery fluid. But what caught his attention was the stiff way their limbs were locked, or paralysis. He'd seen this before, some kind of neural damage. Without treatment, the alien wouldn't last more than a day. Cain sat back on his heels, rubbing his forehead. What was he supposed to do? He glanced around the battlefield. It was quiet now, but it wouldn't stay that way. Soon scavenger drones would arrive, or worse, enemy soldiers sweeping the area. If they found him here, helping a Vayari, he would be executed on the spot. His comlink crackled faintly. A distorted voice from his commander. "Sergeant Cain, report to rally point. Immediate evac. Leave all non-human casualties." Teat. Leave them. Leave them." Cain looked back at the alien. Their eyes were still fixed on him. Even paralyzed, even defeated, they were still proud. Still holding on to life. He clenched his jaw. "Oh, why me? Why do I have to be the one who sees you?" He whispered for a moment. He considered walking away, just standing up and heading for safety. That's what any soldier would do. That's what logic said. But something deep inside him rebelled. Cain remembered his father's words when he joined the military. Never lose your humanity, even in war, especially in war. His chest tightened. "Damn it," he muttered again. Then he set his rifle aside and gently rested. Hand on the alien's shoulder. They flinched slightly at the touch. "I'm not going to hurt you," Kane said softly, even though he wasn't sure if they understood his language. You're not. You're not going to die like this. Not alone." The alien blinked again. A faint glimmer appeared in their eyes. It was hope. Kane exhaled slowly. The decision was made. He wasn't leaving them. Orders be damned. He began to remove pieces of rubble trapping their legs. He worked carefully, talking to them in a calm tone, as if speaking to a wounded friend. His words didn't matter, but his voice filled the silence. "You're heavy? You know that? If you're going to make me carry you, you'd better survive." A small sound, barely a weak click escaped the alien's mouth. Kane froze. Was that a response? He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I hear you." The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the ruins. Kane knew the night would be dangerous. But he also knew one thing for certain. He wasn't walking away. Not this time. The battlefield was silent now. Hours ago. It had been alive with screams, gunfire, and the deafening roar of alien weapons. Now only smoke and the smell of burned metal remained. Craters stretched across the ground, glowing faintly from lingering plasma heat. Bodies both human and alien lay scattered like broken dolls. The war had moved on to another front, leaving this place behind like a forgotten scar. In the middle of the ruins, a single alien warrior lay motionless. Their name was Zyrene, proud fighter of the Vyari Empire. Just this morning, they had been strong, unstoppable, leading a charge against human forces. But fate had turned cruel. A blast from a fragmentation mine had crushed their armor and damaged their neural spine. Now they could not move, not even a finger. They could still see, they could still hear, but their body was a cage. Hours passed. Zyrene had hoped their comrades would return. Surely someone would come back for them, but no one did. Their unit had retreated. The humans had withdrawn as well. Even the scavengers who prowled after battles ignored them. It was as if the galaxy itself had decided to abandon them. Zyrene's breathing grew shallow. Strange ache formed in their chest, not from injury, but from humiliation. For a Vyari warrior, dying in battle was an honor, but dying helpless, paralyzed and alone, was worse than death. They blinked slowly, dust stinging their alien eyes. For a moment they thought they heard footsteps. Hope sparked. Maybe someone had returned. But no, it was only the wind dragging metal scraps across. The ground, more time passed. A Vyari dropship flew overhead, but did not stop. Zyrene watched it disappear into the clouds. They wanted to scream, to shout, to beg, but their mouth could not move. Not even a sound escaped. They remembered their home world, a place of glowing seas and crystal forests. They remembered the faces of their siblings, their commander's words of pride. "You will be remembered, Zyrene. You will bring honor to us all." But would they? Would anyone remember a warrior left behind? Tears welled in their eyes. Something rare for their kind. They hated the feeling of weakness. They'd been raised to believe mercy was for the weak. Yet now they longed for mercy. Longed for anyone, friend or foe, to see them. To save them. Then, faintly, there was movement. Zyrene's blurred vision caught a shape approaching through the smoke. A tall figure. Human. Their heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and hope. Humans were the enemy. The story said they were ruthless, clever, and dangerous. Would this one finish them off, or simply walk past like all the others? The human soldier, clad in dusty, torn armor, stopped a few meters away. He looked tired. His face was smeared with ash and sweat. He carried a rifle loosely in one hand. But his eyes were not cruel. He stared at Zyrene for a long moment. The alien warrior expected hatred, or maybe cold indifference. But instead, there was something else in the soldier's gaze: hesitation, confusion, and beneath it, the faintest flicker of concern. Zyrene's vision blurred again. Were they hallucinating? The human stepped closer, slowly, carefully. He crouched beside the alien's body, scanning the damage, his brow furrowed. He whispered something softly, but Zyrene could not understand the language still. The tone was gentle. For the first time since the blast, Zyrene felt a strange warmth in their chest. Someone saw them.